On the morning of July 20th, 2025, Dhaka was shaken by a moment that changed lives forever. A Bangladesh Air Force training jet lost control and crashed into a college building in the heart of the city. The immediate aftermath was filled with smoke, flames, and frantic rescue efforts. But after the fire was out and the victims were counted, a new storm began to brew, one made not of metal or machinery, but of voices. In the days that followed, students across Bangladesh rose up. What began as mourning transformed into movement. Their message was clear: accountability must follow tragedy. In this documentary, we explore not just the crash, but what came after. The protests, the demands, the official silence, and the fight for change that swept across a nation already hurting. This is the story of youth awakening in the wake of devastation. As the fire trucks left the scene and the rescue operations came to a close, the city of Dhaka stood eerily quiet. Charred books, melted furniture, shattered windows, and blood-stained corridors told the story of what had just occurred. Students who survived began gathering outside the burned college walls. Many were still in shock. Others cried quietly in corners, unable to believe what had happened. The Air Force and government issued brief statements confirming the crash and promising a full investigation. But for many, the words were not enough. Within hours, whispers of discontent began to spread. Students spoke of prior low-flying military jets, of concerns that were never addressed. Teachers quietly shared stories of earlier complaints made to local authorities about flight paths. In the void left by official silence, speculation grew. And so did frustration. By July 21st, a group of students from the affected college held a candlelight vigil near the site. They stood silently, holding signs that read, "Why us?" and "Who is responsible?" Local journalists captured the moment, and soon the images spread on social media. The response was immediate. Messages of solidarity came from other universities, student unions, and youth organizations across Bangladesh. The next day, students from 3 other colleges joined a peaceful march through Dhaka streets. They carried banners that demanded answers. They did not chant slogans. They did not shout. But their silence was louder than any protest. On July 23rd, just 3 days after the crash, over 5,000 students gathered in front of the National Press Club. The gathering was calm, organized, and focused. Representatives read a joint statement outlining their demands. A public explanation of what caused the crash. The publication of safety records for all. Military aircraft compensation for victims and their families. The Prime Minister's office released a second statement that day, offering condolences but warning against unverified speculation and calling for patience during the investigation. The words only fueled the movement. Overnight, #Justice for Dhaka students trended across platforms. Celebrities, writers, and even former military personnel expressed support. By the end of July, protests had spread to Chittagong, Rajshahi, and Silatan and Dhaka. Daily sit-ins were held in front of the Ministry of Education. Students arrived with placards, reading out the names of those injured and showing pictures of the damaged classrooms. Parents joined in, angry and afraid. Local authorities deployed police to maintain order. On August 1st, a group of peaceful demonstrators was briefly detained near the Secretariat. This marked a shift. Students began wearing black armbands and chanting, "We study to live, not to die in silence." The visuals were powerful. Drone footage of the marches flooded YouTube. Documentaries, reels, and news segments began appearing internationally. Bangladesh was watching. So was the world. While the protests raged outside, an internal investigation was quietly underway. Sources later revealed that early evidence did point to mechanical failure, specifically in the aircraft's hydraulic system. But reports were slow to release, and the delay only heightened public suspicion. Students and reporters pushed for transparency. Why had the black box data not been shared publicly? Why was the pilot's name withheld? Most importantly, why were training flights still being conducted over urban areas? Independent aviation experts offered commentary on national TV. Some revealed that certain jets in service were outdated, with maintenance records lacking proper documentation. These claims struck a nerve. Trust in the system, already shaken, began to collapse further. By mid-August, a new wave of protests began, this time involving not just students but teachers, alumni, and civil society organizations. Classes were boycotted. Faculty members joined processions. At one protest in Shebag, over 20,000 people gathered in a single afternoon. A stage was set up. Names of victims were read aloud. Testimonies were shared. One student, her voice trembling, told the crowd, "I saw fire. I heard screams. I smelled the smoke. My friends died in front of me." And no one from the Air Force even visited. The crowd wept. The pain was now public, and it was undeniable. Faced with growing national pressure, the government announced a special committee on August 17th. The panel would include Air Force officers, aviation experts, and an independent journalist. The announcement was seen as a partial win, but students demanded more. They wanted transparency. They wanted live updates. Most of all, they wanted the truth. The following week, the Prime Minister held a press conference. For the first time, she acknowledged the grief of students, thanked them for their peaceful protests, and promised policy-level reforms. The government also declared financial aid for victims' families and announced the relocation of training routes away from major cities. These steps were met with mixed reactions. Some saw progress, others saw delay. In early September, the college where the crash occurred reopened, but it was not the same. A section of the building remained closed, a black banner hung over it. Outside, students built a memorial wall. On it were inscribed the names of the dead and injured, surrounded by handwritten notes, poems, and drawings. Every Friday, students gathered at the wall for 10 minutes of silence. They vowed to keep the memory alive. A new student-led group, Safe Skies Bangladesh, was formed. Its mission: to advocate for better aviation policies, safer school infrastructure, public accountability. As weeks turned into months, the protest movement evolved. A short film titled "The Sky Fell Here" was released on YouTube, garnering millions of views. Schools across the country invited survivors to share their stories. Public art installations, photography exhibitions, and even theater plays were organized. In Dhaka, to preserve the memory, the story of the jet crash became more than an event. It became a chapter in the nation's history, and students, once powerless victims, became its narrators. The crash that claimed lives on July 20th, 2025, was a tragedy. But what followed was something powerful, a movement born out of grief, protests led by the unheard, and a country learning to listen. The legacy of the Bangladesh Air Force jet crash is no longer just about what fell from the sky. It is about what rose from the ground: courage, truth, and change. Students still march, though their numbers are fewer. The black armbands are now symbols of memory, not mourning. Reforms have begun slowly, unevenly, but they have begun. And perhaps in the story of fire and resistance, Bangladesh has taken one small step towards safer skies and a more accountable tomorrow. As the dust settles and the voices quieten, one truth remains unshaken. The tragedy of July 20th was not only about a jet crash, it was about a generation forced to carry the burden of unanswered questions. In the silence left by official statements, the students of Bangladesh spoke louder than ever before. They demanded truth, they demanded justice, and above all, they demanded change. Their candles lit not just vigils, but a national awakening. Their protests were not fueled by politics, but by pain, by the sight of charred books, wounded friends, and classrooms turned to rubble. And while the skies over Dhaka may one day forget the sound of falling metal, the ground will always remember the footsteps of those who marched for accountability. This was more than a crash. This was a reckoning. And though policies may change and officials may come and go, the memories of that day and the courage that followed will echo through time. For every student who stood up, for every voice that refused to stay quiet, this story remains unfinished. And in their resilience, the nation finds hope. As the dust settles and the voices quieten, one truth remains unshaken: the tragedy of July 20th was not only about a jet crash, was about a generation forced to carry the burden of unanswered questions. In the silence left by official statements, the students of Bangladesh spoke louder than ever before. They demanded truth, they demanded justice, and above all, they demanded change. Their candles lit not just vigils, but a national awakening. Their protests were not fueled by politics, but by pain, by the sight of charred books, wounded friends. And classrooms turned to rubble, and while the skies over Dhaka may one day forget the sound of falling metal, the ground will always remember the footsteps of those who marched for accountability. This was more than a crash. This was a reckoning. And though policies may change and officials may come and go, the memories of that day and the courage that followed will echo through time. For every student who stood up, for every voice that refused to stay quiet, this story remains unfinished. And in their resilience, the nation finds hope.